Chapter 13 of A Diamond in the Rough by a Self-Made Man. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Chapter 13, in which Moses Wyse has a scheme to do up Fred King. Gummit was not caught, so it was presumed he had escaped from the state and probably had gone to Canada. Jack Wyse was duly tried and, largely on Fred's evidence and his past record, got the maximum penalty and was sent to the state prison. Moses Wyse and Mickey Gibbs kept very shady whenever Fred was within reach of them, and the lad concluded to let them alone as long as they didn't bother him. Fred liked his new position under the chief very much indeed. He had a better opportunity to study and improve his mind. The rough diamond qualities had begun to wear off from the day he was emancipated from the screen room of the breaker, and the polish had commenced to show itself little by little after he was introduced to the engine room, from which time he saw much more of the John Marsh family and began to associate with a better grade of the village society. Now the polish was coming on more rapidly, the superior qualities of his mind and the energy of his character asserting themselves. "He is a remarkable boy," said Chief Engineer Wesley to Superintendent Maxwell one day a few months after Fred had come under his jurisdiction. "He is bright, attentive, and smart, and dutiful almost to a fault. I like him very much." "I believe you," replied Mr. Maxwell. "One would scarcely think to look at him now that a few years ago he was an apparently ignorant little slate picker. Why, 6 months ago he bought the 20-acre clover farm for $600, paying $200 down, his savings to that date, and giving a mortgage for the balance. The place is easily worth today $1,200. Mr. Marsh is acting as his guardian." "You surprise me," said the chief engineer. "Take my word for it, that boy is going to make his mark." One day Fred was in Wilkes-Barre and accidentally came across a sale of horses. He was very fond of animals, and one of his ambitious hobbies was to become the owner of a good horse. A very handsome-looking mare was put up while he was looking on. The auctioneer explained that she was afflicted with some disease of the eye, which was apparent to the onlookers, but he did not dwell much on the fact as a matter of course, but devoted his oratory to calling attention to the animal's other good qualities. Many would-be purchasers examined the mare with much interest, but the eye trouble deterred them from bidding. Finally, the auctioneer offered her for $50, but nobody took him up. Then he reduced the price to $40, without success, and the mare was about to be taken back to her stall when Fred impulsively shouted, "I'll give you $35. She's yours, young man." Fred only had a $5 bill with him, and paid that on account while he hastened to the mining village to get his bank book. As soon as he could get back to Wilkes-Barre, he drew the necessary funds and took charge of the mare. Then he consulted the stable veterinary surgeon. "And the animal has got an incurable cataract of the eye," replied that person very frankly. "Will she become blind, do you think?" "In time, yes." Fred asked no more questions on the subject, but took his purchase back with him and left her at Clover Farm. "I may have made a poor investment," he said to himself, "but I don't care. I like that horse." Fred thought the matter over for a week, and finally got books treating about the human eye as well as the diseases of horses, and studied the subject carefully. Finally, he decided to treat the mare himself. "It is possible the veterinary doctor was mistaken. At any rate, I'm going to do something for the horse myself." He tried several remedies without result, but at length hit upon one which had been notably successful with the human eye. As a matter of fact, the mare was not afflicted with a real cataract, though she had many of the symptoms of the disease. Fred's perseverance and gentle care triumphed, and the animal was completely cured in 4 months. In due course of time, a fine colt was added to Fred's possessions. The animal was scarcely 3 months old when the boy was offered $3,000 for him, but refused to sell. Fred was now 18 years old and had advanced several steps upward in the chief engineer's office. Mr. Wesley put a great deal of confidence in him, for his work was strictly accurate and well done, and therefore could be relied on. Although he had no actual collision with either Moss Wyse or Mickey Gibbs for more than a year, those worthies had it in for him just the same. On the principle that all things come to him who waits, they were laying on their oars, so to speak, hoping, if not actually watching, for a chance to get back at him. Annie Marsh had developed into a very charming young miss of 17. Many of the villagers were of the opinion that in time she would be the most beautiful woman in the Wyoming Valley. Fred had always admired her in his way, Now he was prouder than ever to be seen in her society. Occasionally of a Sunday he took her out riding, and once in a while he would induce her to take a sail with him in a small catboat, the property of Mr. Wesley, on the delightful Susquehanna. "I shall be off duty tomorrow afternoon," he said to her one Friday evening as they stood talking at the corner of the lane leading to her home. "I wish you'd take a sail with me." It was dusk, and they stood quite close together in the shadow of the hedge. "Well," she replied a little bit coquettishly, "are you really so very anxious for me to go?" "Come now, Annie, you know I am," he said earnestly. "I'll think about it," she said, flashing a saucy glance at him. "Then you won't give me a decided answer?" he said in a disappointed tone. "I must ask Mother," she replied demurely. "You know she won't object," persisted Fred. "Well," answered the girl coyly after a pause, "if it's a very pleasant afternoon—" "You'll go?" interjected Fred eagerly. "I didn't say so," she replied archly. "But that's what you were going to say, wasn't it?" "Who gave you permission to catechize me?" she asked laughingly. "Oh, pshaw, Annie! You're in a teasing humor tonight. Come now, be reasonable. You're going, of course?" "I presume you won't give me any rest till I say yes. You're the most persevering boy I ever met." "Am I?" "Yes, you are. Well, yes. Now, are you satisfied?" "Well, ought to be. I'll call for you at 3. "I will look for you at that hour." Then the young people continued their walk to the cottage, where Fred was invited to take supper. They had scarcely turned their backs on the hedge before a sallow, freckled face, in which a physiognomist would hardly have found a redeeming feature, was thrust through the leaves and twigs, and the small, wicked-looking eyes followed the retreating forms of the boy and girl up the lane. It was Moses Wyse, not much different than when we saw him last in the cellar of the old mill, but more than a year older. A second face popped up over his shoulder, which could never be mistaken for anyone but Mickey Gibbs. Mickey was still a mule driver in the mines, and his ambition was fully satisfied with the post, for he could beat the dumb beast to his heart's content without fear of retaliation on their part. He often boasted that he had put 6 of them out of commission, and we have no doubt but that he spoke the truth. "He's going to take his gal on the river tomorrow. Did you hear that, Mickey?" "Do you think I'm deaf?" replied his crony, ejecting a squirt of tobacco juice into the lane. "We've been wanting to get square with him for a good while, ain't we?" "Sure thing. If you'd more backbone, we'd have done it, too. Long ago." "I'm thinking we have a chance now," said Moses mysteriously. "Let's hear about it, then," asked Mickey with some curiosity. "He's going to use Wesley's boat." "What if he is?" "We could go down to the boathouse tonight, break into the place, and with an auger bore 6 holes in the bottom of the boat." "So she'd sink?" "No," returned Moses with a snarl. "We'd plug 'em loosely from the bottom, tie stout cords to the ends of the plugs, and then tie the other ends of the cords to spikes we drive into out-of-sight places in the boathouse under water." "Well?" asked Mickey. "What then?" "What then?" exclaimed Moses scornfully. "Why, when he pushed the boat out into the river, with him and the gal on board, the cords would pull out the plugs, wouldn't they?" "If they was strong enough." "We'll see they're strong enough," nodded his companion determinedly. "Then the water would come into the cabin, and they'd never notice till it run out into the cockpit, which is a foot higher. By that time they'd be way out on the river, too far to sail back before the boat'd sink. See?" Mickey saw and grinned. "You got a great head arter all, Moses. I never believed it. Are you with me in this?" "Bet your life I am." "Come over to my house and we'll make the plugs. We'll stop at the store and I'll get a roll of cord. We've got a lot of good stout stuff there that'll just answer the purpose." Then the two heads disappeared behind the shrubbery again, and the lane was as silent as before. End of chapter 13.